Welcome to Jian Batra's 15-minute FPL podcast, my podcast. And what we're going to be doing today is going to take a deep dive into Gameweek 10. There are so many macro-level topics that need to be discussed, and the decisions are so marginal that I'm going to give you two cohesive arguments for most topics and hopefully let you apply that within the context of your team. So let's get into it. Right, the first thing we're going to talk about is the route to Saka and how dispensable Son and Maddison are. Now, Saka is an unbelievable asset, and whilst not entirely talismanic, he's not too far off either. Especially with penalties in the fixtures Arsenal have coming up, I'm very bullish on him. One reason being the injury to Jesus. I know it's a minor hamstring injury, but he probably misses the game against Sheffield United. We've seen the repercussions this has for Martinelli. He gets shifted a lot wider, and they try and almost bombard those central areas, less so through combinations, but more so through a Havertz and Nketiah kind of breaking your way through the door type of approach. This requires Saka to come inside and link a little bit more with Odegaard and White overlapping. So I think Saka this week could be a phenomenal option, and we'll come on to captaincy, but I really like him for that as well. As such, we need to find a route. Now, it's very difficult to upgrade the likes of Bowen to Saka when Bowen presents such great value. And not only that, but he's significantly cheaper. These two, however, are much closer. Maddison at 881, depending on where you bought him, and Son at 95 now. Now, for me, Maddison to Saka, if you can afford it in one move, is an absolute no-brainer. I think it's the easiest swap you'll see all season. The reason being is Spurs' fixtures in the next three aren't that good. They've got Palace away, Chelsea at home, and Wolves away. Now, to touch on Chelsea and Wolves especially, they can both operate with very aggressive mid-blocks, and I think that's the system which Maddison, as an FPL asset, is hurt most by. He's fine against low blocks because he can drop into the deeper phases to help progress, but then he can also get himself higher up for those more attacking actions, closer to the box, just because of how much of the ball Spurs have, the lack of press from the other side. Against a high press, he's got Son running in behind. He's very good on transition, given his quality of pass. So I think those things are all fine. But against the mid block, I think Postecoglou will take the more defensive approach here, with Maddison specifically, make him drop into those deeper areas. So he dictates the game more, and they rely more on the front three to get the goals for them, or maybe even like a darting run from Sarr, something like that from the midfield. So I see him as very dispensable. I think just going away to Palace on a Friday night, I know they just got thrashed by Newcastle, but overall they've been pretty decent defensively. I know they have a few injuries, but I don't think it'll be that easy. So I think Maddison to Son in a move, or even if you have two free transfers, is an absolute no-brainer. Now, moving on to Son, this is far, far, far more difficult, because what you're doing is not only are you giving up value, because you're probably losing about 0.2, 0.3, you're giving up someone who it's quite difficult to get back to, given he's at a very awkward price point. There is no real midfielder above 9, bar him, who's worth owning, given De Bruyne is injured. So it's and he's also fixture proof, right? He's statistically been the best finisher in the world for the last 5 years. So that begs the question: is it worth the gamble? Now, like I said, I think in the next three, his fixtures aren't great. I think after that, Villa, City, and West Ham are fantastic for him. But for the next three, do I think Saka scores more? Yes, I do. And I think he also presents a captaincy option. So the way I see it is, given you'd have to use a transfer, I think if you're going to captain Saka, it's probably worth going Son to Saka. But otherwise, I think the transfer's probably better used elsewhere, given how fixture-proof Son is, and given that you would like him back. I'd try and find another route to Saka, and I would much rather take a -4 to sell Maddison to Saka rather than just going Son to Saka in one move, because I think over the long term, maybe like the next 4 to 5 weeks, that will definitely help. Okay. I'm not trying to convince you that this is a bad asset. I think he's the second best forward in the game after Haaland, and I think it's very hard to debate otherwise. The fixture, especially this week, is fantastic. It's one of the best in the league. I'm just going to try and present to you a slightly different argument so that I show you he's very, very, very good, but not essential. I don't currently believe there is anyone who is really essential in this game. Maybe bar Salah, because where would you spend the money anyway? And his fixtures are so good for the foreseeable future. But Watkins has holds in 2 games this season. One against West Ham, one against Brighton. 2 teams that are defensively structured, in my opinion, not particularly well. Brighton are going to press you. They're going to press you high, and they're also going to break the press, meaning they can lose the ball in their own final third. West Ham, we saw, are willing to offer so much space between the lines. And that's something that hasn't really worked this year as a whole. A lot of teams have tried it in the league and it just hasn't worked, right? You saw how easy West Ham's press was easy to bypass. They would hit that second line so quickly. It was just one pass and they were in, right? Even switches of play were so dangerous because of the spaces between the lines were so big. Now, whilst Luton are nowhere near the quality of West Ham, with all due respect, they're not going to give you that. They're going to give you a more compact, very compact low block, and they're not really going to press Villa too high. I also think going forward they have a little bit going forward, which naturally is never good. As I say, attack is the best form of defense. Right, Forest away, similar. I don't think they'll give Villa too much. I think that's difficult ground. Again, a more compact game. Now with Fulham, they've got at home. I think that should be fine. Unless Marco Silva's learned from his mistakes, like, for example, the game against Tottenham, they conceded both goals due to them trying to play at the back. I think they went a bit more compact as well, and I think they will make a small style alteration, given that there are similarities between Villa and Spurs. I think you could see maybe these 3 games being slightly tougher than is imagined. Now, that is not to say that you don't expect Villa to win all of them and Watkins to do well. You do. I do. But I just don't think he's as nailed on to Hall as people are saying week in, week out. And we'll come to why that's important when we come to the wildcard section. But I just wanted to give you a counter to maybe the general narrative. And I think it's fair. I think it's fair analysis. Right. Now, a strategy that's been popularized in recent weeks, no Haaland. Now, to their credit, the no Haaland camp have done absolutely fantastically. And I commend them and I applaud them because I think it's worked out fantastically. And they've been brave to do that. And fair play to them. 12 to 15, those 4 games, you're not too worried about not owning Haaland. I'm not saying you can't score a brace every game, but I think just given this price, I think it's fine. The next 2 are huge in this no Haaland versus Haaland debate. If he fails in these next 2, like in relative terms, then they've won already. They've most certainly won. Bournemouth in 11 is plum. I'm going to captain him. I'm more than happy to own him there. I think he'll be better than Salah in that week. It's just this week is so big. I can see United setting up in a similar way to the way they did at the Emirates, where they go very compact and rather than trying to kill teams with short transitions and winning the ball high up the pitch, they go for the longer transitions with the outlets of Maguire and Bruno from deeper areas, the likes of Haaland and Rashford. The City are going to have a lot of the ball. I just imagine they will have a lot of the ball, and disproportionately so in comparison to a normal Manchester derby, I'd say. I think they'll also have those balls in more advanced areas where the game's slightly more settled. I think it's not the easiest game in the world for him. I'm not going to say, oh, he's definitely going to blank. I don't think the haul is as probabilistic as maybe some would seem. People just see United, bad position in the league, and it's done. I don't think it's quite like that. But naturally, there is still the capacity for him to haul. I just don't think it's as nailed on, like Watkins, as people are saying. Now, Alvarez has been fantastic, but I don't think over the long run, he's going to be able to provide the cover for Haaland. I think this is a ticking time bomb. You look at the XG difference, 5 over 9 games. 5 is huge. And I think it's only a matter of time before Haaland becomes a little bit more clinical and we start to see the hauls week in, week out. And to use my point from Watkins earlier and Alvarez, I don't think they're at the level of Haaland. And I think we will see a somewhat of a decline eventually. And I think Alvarez and Watkins both going to start now. Again, both very good assets, but they've been going punch for punch with Haaland. I think now is the time where they don't. Like I said, I don't think United's that easy a game, but I personally wouldn't sell him, and I'm happy to keep him for that reason. I just don't think he's, over the long run, I don't think anyone can match him. Right. That comes on to one of the big ones of the week, which is captaincy. There are 4 premier options, I'd say. I've put Son in there as well, because I think given his form, given the fact that Palace got beat badly last game, I can understand the narrative as to why people would go there. Personally, I wouldn't. I think it's too big a risk, and there are so many other good options. Now, my current favourite is Saka. I think the fixture is by far the best. I think there actually is a difference in quality between Luton and Sheffield United. I think Sheffield United are the worst of the 2. I think they're also willing to be slightly more expansive than Luton, which bodes well for Saka. With penalties, he's going to play 90. He got the early hook against Sevilla, so I'm convinced he plays 90. We already discussed why Jesus being out is beneficial for him. He gets to come inside more. So for me, that's my preference. Now, looking at the other 3, I think it's unbelievably close. The thing with Forest against Liverpool is Forest have been pretty decent defensively at home, less so away, which is, I understand, but you should be able to translate performances regardless of ground, right? So I don't think this, again, is a fixture where Liverpool are going to slap them silly. I think this will be slightly closer than people imagine. Again, I expect Liverpool to win. But with Nunez in the side, I imagine Salah operates in a slightly more creative role. Just slightly. I don't think the difference is as big as people say. He's been fairly ineffective in the last 2 games. I know he's got 2 braces, thankfully. But I don't think he's been that effective. I think naturally 2 penalties, a mistake from Brighton, and a 97th minute goal. I think we saw this with Mbeumo early in the season. Now, I'm not trying to compare him in terms of player quality, but we did see Mbeumo have a very good run in the first 3 weeks, which had 2 penalties and a late goal, and then he kind of dropped off. So I'm still putting Saka ahead of him. I don't think Salah's a bad option by any case. I just don't think the haul, again, is as nailed on. We've discussed Haaland and we've discussed Watkins. But for me, Saka is by some way the best. Then with the other 3, I think it's far more difficult. I think Salah's the very safe play, right? I think this may be a week for being slightly more strategic as opposed to going off gut instinct. I think Salah's the very safe play. Haaland's probably the highest upside, I would say, out of the 3. And then Watkins probably kind of your high floor, middle-ish ceiling. So for me, I would kind of see which outlook you prefer, of how you prefer to play this week, and go from there. Lastly, to touch... Well, actually, no, we've got the wildcards after this. But before that, just to touch on the defenders. Now, Destiny Udogie has been fantastic. Spurs have been fantastic. And he gets himself into great positions. So you could viably keep him. I'm not sure how many clean sheets there are in the next 6 to 8. I don't think there are too many. But given the capacity for him to haul, given that you probably have some value stored up in him, I can understand keeping him. But if you have the luxury of selling him, then I think Gabriel is the best transfer you can make for a defender, especially this week. We've seen Sheffield United's defensive weakness at defending set pieces. Just look at what happened against Sheffield United. He's the perfect person to exploit that. They have a fantastic run coming up, Arsenal, so they're the same price if you bought him at 4.5. Otherwise, you have to pay an extra 0.1. So I think for me, that straight swap, if you can afford that luxury this week, is fantastic. Now, Maguire is a great enabler on the wildcard. You could even potentially have him as a 4th defender. I think that's okay, given the next 3 fixtures are really good after City. 4.2 million for a guy who will probably be decent on the bonus points, given the volume of passes. He gives you threat from set pieces. The fixtures are very good. 4.2 million. He's cheap. So I know the narrative around him and Man United. I don't believe it at all, especially around him. But I would say that's certainly something to consider, because I don't think you're getting better at value at 4.2 anywhere else. Braithwaite is nailed at 4.0. Fixtures aren't particularly great, but for your 4.0 million defender, I guess you just hope that if you need him in the weeks where his fixtures are good, you can play him. And I'm sure that'll be fine. Dyche's system caters to Everton defensive assets doing well. So again, that's fine. And then lastly, Trippier. I think keep him for this week, but I really don't mind selling him. I think there's so much value tied up there. You've already got your points. The fixtures are starting to turn. They have a few injuries. And he just is so expensive. That's the main thing. So I think he's a viable sell after this week. Or even if you wanted to sell him this week, I can see Wolves scoring. Okay. I'm going to flick through 3 different wildcards just to show you 3 different variations. Now, you can take the structure and change a player here or there. For example, here you could change Bruno to Maddison. If you so wish, you could change Mitchell to Maguire, Strakosha to Turner, etc., etc. I'm going to show you 3 different wildcards. And overall, I really like all of these. I have my preferences, but it's just to show you what you can kind of go with. So this one I'd say is super template. It's very hard to have Salah, Saka, Son, Haaland, and Watkins. So all of them kind of avoid one of them. In this draft, we avoid Son purely for the next 3 fixtures not being fantastic. It has a bit of everything, right? You get Bruno's run in the next 3 games, and given he's so talismanic, I think you can expect a decent floor, if not a ceiling. Saka, Salah, Haaland, Watkins, we discussed. Bowen, I've discussed on previous pods. At 7-2 with the fixtures he's got, one of my favourite picks in the game. Excellent value. And Mitoma is more of a short-term punt. I mean, Fulham at home in 10, Sheffield United at home in 12, and the fixtures either side are good. I don't think you can complain at 6-5. There's a high upside option. The defence rotates fantastically. You start Gabriel this week. You bench him next week, and then you just go from there pretty much. You can probably bench Jian Batra 12 if you so wish. So again, I like this team. It has pretty much every base covered, bar Son. This team, slightly different. This team has every base covered, bar Watkins, because like I discussed earlier, there are different routes to playing this. Nunes has such good fixtures, right, for the foreseeable future. You need to relinquish one of what I would call the power 5 at the moment. And Nunes honestly could match him. In the next 3, in the next 5, in the next 8, he could match him. And he comes in at a mil cheaper. So he allows you to go Bruno to Son. So this is kind of the different variation where you fade Watkins. And Watkins may outscore him, but would he outscore Son in comparison to Bruno? I'm not too sure. So this is another combination. It's why I think it's viable to fade him. There are like other solutions. He's not essential, although he's the best. And this is a no Haaland draft. So this gives you a seriously good draft across the board. One of the main things about this is you get the midfield. There are no sacrifices. You just get good fixtures and great players, all talisman, week in, week out. You essentially go for the route that Alvarez can cover Haaland, and then you go for the fact that Trent's got such good fixtures with his upside, and you look to attack that. Now, the route back would essentially be in 16, probably having to do some form of a -4 or selling someone at 15. You would sell Trent and then sell one of the mids to upgrade Alvarez, and that would be your route back. So I think all these drafts are fairly viable, and they're just different structures I thought I'd show you. And that's it. So if you could please like and subscribe, that would be greatly appreciated. Any comments, again, greatly appreciated. And if you would follow both myself and Fantasy Football Hub here and on Twitter, that would be, again, great. And here's our app. We've got 30% off Fantasy Football Hub membership at the moment. 7-day free trial. I cannot recommend it enough. You can get your teams rated, AI transfers, the lot, statistics, the lot. So yeah, have a great day and good luck this week. Bye.